megacycles by authority of the Federal Communications Commission. A test program follows. To you who are trained technically, I need hardly say that there's still a number of problems to solve. I guess you know them as well as anybody knows them. But I think we've proceeded far enough to justify the statement, at least, that these technical problems are not insurmountable.
Nope, he's got the wrong title on it.
Good to go.
It's KiP versus the Midwest
Hello, this
Martians.
is Karen from the Final Swindle, and again I am joined by
Woody, also from Final Swindle.
Yay. So we have a really interesting top four matchup. This is KiP, Knowledge is Power, versus Midwest Martians needs AEmber. So we've talked about we have two of the heftiest acronyms in the game of Keyforge facing off for an epic battle at 58,
right?
Yeah, 58 SAS cap. 58 SAS cap. Really, really nice decks. Obviously, we're in the top four of code at this point. So I'll let Woody start us off with the Captain KiP's deck.
Sure. So this is Boundless T Vengestorm, and this is a great AOE that's sort of vastly underrated by SAS here. It's at 53. I'll start with the logos because I think it's kind of what I'm seeing in this deck. It's sort of imperative that you get some of that efficiency and you get that redacted out early. And not to jump the gun too much, but I think this is a good matchup where there's no R in the opposing deck. So getting that redacted out early is something of a win condition. It's such the case that it can become a free key that like absolutely dominates a game. Like I think we all have like a good redacted deck, right? Where it's like when this goes off, it feels just so utterly unfair. I mean, it's just what it is. To sort of move back, and it's funny, like SAS sort of rates that the worst of the three houses in this deck, which I think is kind of interesting because the other houses are going to do way more sort of AEmber generation and creature control and stuff like that. In the disc we have a double Pit Lord, double Dust Imp, which is really interesting. I mean, that's a ton of AEmber, and Pit Lord's one of those cards where it's you sort of don't know if you play it in every matchup, depending on how sort of locked you get. And Karen, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Sure.
And the Old Yerk is also a nice card to get some cards out of your hand, and obviously Schuler to do some stealing in a deck that desperately needs some A.
So yeah, to piggyback as you were asking there, double Pit Lord in this deck is really rough unless you're checking hard for last key.
Mm-hmm.
This deck has no board clear in this. It's got no way to even really kill them other than just beating them into something. So I think this is a toss to Pit Lord decks, but you do have the Old Yerk to kind of, yeet them out of your hand.
Right.
But I just can't imagine playing them. I really can't.
Yeah, it totally depends on if the other deck is able to disrupt you in any way, because you're disrupting yourself, right? Like you're giving yourself this weird sort of self determined control the weak into dis, which again in this deck it's not horrible if you've got the dust imps out and you're generating so much AEmber. But yeah, I'd be curious to know if they play them or not. And then lastly, moving to the Untamed, the things that I'm seeing that really matter, obviously the full moon with a good amount of creatures, including a Penpaka Anga to beef everything up, which can be really nice, especially if you need things like if you're beefing up like a Brain Eater, that's just great. And a Dusk Witch, which Dusk Witch in this deck could certainly get pretty like that is a big kind of burn the witch, obviously. But especially in this deck, if you're like bringing Dust Imps in ready and killing
Right.
them on the turn of, like, that's pretty nice. Um, and then lastly, the Pose Pixies, which could really help play some defense against a deck that's going to do a lot of stealing or capturing. But those are kind of the big things I'm seeing.
Right. And just to like there is a potential where if your opponent has a big creature out, if you had the Dusk Witch, you could play the Pit Lord and then like kind of just ram it right into something because it would come in ready.
Right.
Um, it's a very fringe case though, but yeah, no, I think that's very well covered on that deck. So I'll move to the Midwest Martians deck here. This is an AOA at 58 SAS, and it is just like really, really, really good for the SAS. Like, I mean, I'm reading over this deck list and I cannot understand how it is rated as low as it is rated. Mostly because it's just this incredibly kind of synergistic object of a deck, right? We've got the Arantu's Binding and Arantu the Chained, which is going to be so for those of you who might want a refresher, it's you can play those bindings. When you play it, it deals 2 to one of your creatures. And then when you reap with Arantu the Chained, it's going to bring those bindings back to your hand. Each of the bindings has a pip. So you're going to be continually kind of recycling those. When you recycle with Arantu, you're doing 2 with 2 splash to your opponent's creatures. This is paired with the Untamed, which has the double persistence hunting and double They're Everywhere. So you're going to make the creatures kind of useless, and then you're going to splash this damage. And finally, in the shadows, we've got triple throwing stars. So what you're going to do with this deck is splash damage very strategically, and then ideally be cashing in your throwing stars for 3 amber each in like a perfect world, right? You've got double unlock gateway if you need the board clears. You've got too much to protect if they try to rush massively above you. It's really, really, really nice for the SAS, like I was talking about. But moving specifically to the matchup, one last thing, it does have a key charge for that out at the end. Because at the SAS, like Akichi can just be so much better than Amber Control, and we're seeing that in both decks. So with that said, we can move to kind of matchup specifics. As Woody had pointed out, there's no R in the Midwest Martians deck. That being said, you're playing an 18 creature deck, which is, somewhere around average, but is pretty good for me. But the Dust Imps are not, obviously.
Right.
I'm not going to be able to splash my kind of damage that way. So I don't know. Looking at it, I'm trying to imagine like Tang, the Midwest Martians deck, needs to do a very specific thing, right? And how able to do that will I be, essentially? And I'm not actually seeing that I'll be especially kind of able to, right? You have the Logos creatures are not really going to let me do that. I'm not going to be able to splash the damage kind of the way I want. The Untamed certainly is, but it's going to come with an Amber Rush. Obviously, I'm just going to be generating a good amount in this deck, but I actually feel that your deck is kind of running around and doing something that's like kind of missing the point of what I'm trying to stick. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, on the one hand, I'm looking at Boundless, the KiP Captain's deck, and it is low on C. Um, kind of, there are decks that I could imagine really taking advantage of that,
Right.
but Tang happens to be kind of built the inverse way, where it's got 20 actions and 13 creatures.
Right.
Um, which is, yeah, it's a little bit, it's a little bit inside out of what you want to see. Um, Especially if you are gonna kind of max out the Ortanu stuff, and
Right.
you've only got 25 effective power. Um, Suggests you're usually in a situation where you don't have a lot of stuff on your own side to be dealing damage to.
Right.
Um, like you don't want to take out your own streaks, kind of. Um, Another
Yeah.
thing that's interesting, you can kind of you can imagine some really messed up plays in Boundless that I don't really know if I see as much in Tang, although the key charge is obviously a possibility. Like you can imagine in Boundless, like you could help her bot out a full moon, and if Dusk Witch is already out there,
Right.
and the Panpaca, and you're bringing everything in ready, and you're getting Amber for it, and you're reaping or fighting or whatever. You can imagine like some really robust board that really gets away from Tang.
Right. I think, yeah, there are just more ways for Boundless Vengestorm to win, basically. I think Tang was expecting a very different kind of deck, probably hoping for some kind of big Brobnar to just kind of chew away at for Amber.
Mm.
Um, and I feel like both decks, as you had kind of alluded to, um, would absolutely chew up one of those decks, right?
Mhm.
And they need to make sure that they can do that. The KiP deck is just rushier. Again, it has more of those win conditions, so I'm pretty comfortable calling that a pretty favorable matchup for KiP. I can imagine a scenario where Tang just gets away from it on pips, but
Yes, that's true. Although it's funny, right? Because Tang brings 15 printed Amber, and that's a lot actually. That's
Boundless has 19
and
though. Like
exactly.
so,
Balance is mine. Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly. It's a bad matchup. And again, having 19, 15 is a lot. I think still for the SAS cap.
yeah.
That's just a really good amount.
19. I mean, I have great decks with 19 pips, right? So, I
Yeah,
mean,
but they're
we're
like 20 more SAS points.
right. Yeah. No, I mean, we're really looking at a very, very robust deck here for KiP.